Hello, welcome to another video of Code Snippet, and this is going to be another simple video inside Spring Security. So we have seen most of the things inside Spring Security apart from how to manage your users. We have created multiple users inside our application, but we have created by using command line runner, which is not a feasible approach in real-time applications. So in this video, we are going to see how we can manage all the users, how we can create users by using APIs. We are going to see the implementation of how to create a user by using APIs depending on the roles of the user. So let's get started without wasting any time. This is going to be a fun video, so sit back, relax and enjoy the show. Alright, so let's quickly jump into the agenda of this particular video. Very simple agenda where we are going to look into user management in Spring Security. So we will start with user management, how we can manage the user, and we will see the implementation quickly. So before jumping into anything else, let's quickly have a quick recap of what we have seen until now. We are looking into this weather service to implement Spring Security. And we have implemented this Spring Security filter chain where we are working on JWT authentication. And here if you see, we have these users. So this is basically users entity which is implementing user details. User details is basically coming from Spring Security. It's a interface provided by Spring Security which gives us all these method. And in the last few videos, we have also seen the authorization part of that. And we have implemented roles. So if you see over here, we should have something called as roles. So here we have roles, admins and user, right? We have a couple of roles which we can assign to this particular user. So if you see over here, we will have something called as roles, and each role will have a set of permissions over here. And permissions is again an entity where we have three type of permissions: read, write, delete. And if you remember how we are creating users over here, so we have something called as a command line runner, right? So we have this command line runner over here where what we are doing, we are just creating a new admin. We are giving some password by using password encoder and we are saving that into a repository. But this is not an ideal way of doing that. You cannot create users inside your real-time application like this. Here we have quickly created this admin and user for demo purpose, right? But it should not be used like this inside our real life applications. So in the real life applications, we should be creating users and admins by a different way. So that is something which we are going to look into this particular video. Now let's get back over here and let's get started with how we can create and manage users. Let's try to understand how to create and manage users by using this diagram. So let's say we are working on a public application. You might have used many public applications or many websites. What you can do over there, you can just go and register yourself, right? You can go ahead and register, you put your email ID, password, blah, 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 right? It will just create a user for you. In the same way, if you have a public application, you can create a user by using self-registration. What we can do, we can go to UI, type our username and password and we get our self-register. So here we have a role, right? This role, this user role is basically for a public user. And this admin role is basically for administrator. But now admin cannot self-register himself, right? He needs to be registered in the database and it should be an authorized person. Or if you need to create other admins, then only admin should have permission to create other admins. That is when this other flow comes into picture. Normal user can go ahead and use the API and get themselves registered. But admin needs to be manually entered into database, the first admin, and the other admins needs to be created by using that particular admin. So one admin can create multiple other admins, but user cannot create admins, right? Now this is for a public application. So if you're working on a public application, then you should go with this approach. But if you are working on an internal application, let's say, then there is no user registration, right? Self-registration is not allowed. So that goes out of the picture. But in this case, your admin can create other admins and your admin can add other users inside your applications as well. You might have seen multiple applications where you need to raise a request for certain access, and that guy administrator will create a user for you in the database, and after that you can go ahead and log in inside your application. So that is mostly for the internal applications, and that is how it works. There is no self-registration. So what we are going to do, we are going to start implementing this and we will see how we can implement it very easily, right? So we are going to follow API based approach over here. Since we do not have any UI, this registration can also work with UI. So let's get started with the implementation. So let's directly jump into the implementation part over here. So what we are going to do over here, first we will create a DTO. So let me create a new Java class, and here I will just say register user request. so that we can accept a JSON from a API, right? So we are going to create a API, isn't it? So this is going to be a normal Pojo where we will have details of user. So we will have similar details as of this one. So let me just copy these three over here and add it over here. And I will just remove this guy. Enumerated is not needed. So what all things we have over here? We have username, password, and role. This role is going to be optional field for your user, completely optional, because when the user is registering himself, he don't care about the role, right? This is internal to our application. But when the admin is creating another user, admin can create either user or admin can also create an admin, right? So admin can pass the role respectively over here. And here I will say command N and I will create getters and setters. And for everyone I will create, and that's it. So we have created our register user request. Now we will go to, let's say, controllers. Where is our controller? And create a new controller. And let's give it a name as user controller and let's create it. And we will say here, this is going to be a REST controller. And let's go ahead and create a service as well. So let's say new user service. So there we go. We have created user service as well. And here what we are going to do, we have user detail repository over here, which is basically a JPA repository for our users. So users is basically our entity which is extending or implementing your user details. So this is basically entity which is going to be stored inside your database users table. So let's go back over here and let's auto wire our user details repository. So I will say user detail repository and make it private final. And that will ask me to initiate inside a constructor, which is basically a constructor injection. So there we go. And here what we are going to do, we are going to create a new method to register a user. So here we will say public, for now let's return a string and I will say register user, right? And this guy will accept what? This guy will accept the request that we have created, isn't it? And that's it. So this is basically our function. Now what this function will do? So here overall we need to do three things. First thing, we need to check if user is already present. If the user is already present, then return some kind of response, right? Respective response. Second thing we need to do is encode password. Second thing, encode the password which is present in this particular request, because we do not directly store the password inside your database, right? We need to encode that by using password encoders. And third thing obvious is basically save user. Now let's first implement this guy. So what we will do, we will just first check if user detail repository dot find by username, and here we will pass the username coming from this particular registered user dot get username. And here we will say if present. If present, then what we will do, we will just return the respective message, or rather we can throw exception as well. Let's say throw new runtime exception saying user already exists. And that is basically our first part. Let's go to next one, right? So here what we need to do, we need to encode the password in the request. So what we need to do, we need to first create a user, because we are going to store the users inside our database, right? So I will just say new users. There we go. So we have a users object. So I will just say users dot set username. The username is going to be username from this request. And second thing we are going to do over here is users dot set role, and the role is going to be coming from again your registered user dot get role, and the third thing is going to be your password. But now this password is not encoded. We need to encode this password. Now if you remember in the Spring Security, if I go back over here, we should have Spring Security architecture over here. If you remember, we have something called as password encoder for encoding our password. What we are going to do, we are going to use the same password encoder which we have created over here. So if you go over here, we have this password encoder bean, which is basically using Bcrypt password encoder. What we will do, we will just inject that over here in the user service. So I will just say password encoder and I will just make it private final, and that will ask me to initiate it inside a constructor. There we go. And here what we will do, we will just say password encoder dot encode, and we will just give the request dot get password. So that will just encode the password for us and it will just store it inside a database for us. And the last thing we need to do is we need to save this inside a database. So I will just say save, and I will just pass this users entity over here, and that should do the job. And what we can do, we can perhaps return this users directly from this particular class, and I will just say return from this thing, because this will return us the users, right? This save method will return us the users. There we go, we have implemented all our to-dos. So let me just remove them, and that's it. So we have our user service ready. Let's go back to our user controller, and here what we will do, we will first inject our user service. User service. I will again make this guy as private final, and that will ask me to initialize in the constructor, which is basically constructor injection. And now what we are going to do, let's create a endpoint over here. So let's create a public method and let it return string for now, and we will say register user. And here we will accept what we will accept. Register user request we will accept, and we will mark it as a request body. There we go. So we will accept this guy over here, and what we will do, first thing we will do is, as this is going to be a public API and register user, and for a public users we will first add a role inside this particular request. So we will say set role, and we will add role as role.user, right? Because this is going to be a user. And now I will say our user service dot register user, and we will just pass the request over here, which will add the user for us. And what we are going to return, and let's try to use response entity over here, and response entity of, perhaps we will create a new entity for response as well. So we can create another DTO. What I will do, I will just create a new class, let's say user response. And here we will simply add few details over here, where we will add ID, username and role, and password is not needed when we return this particular response, right? And here what I will do, I will just say command N, we will create a new getters and setters. Apart from that, let's create a new parameterized constructor as well, so that we can easily create this particular user response. There we go. So we have created this, and here I will just say user response now. But now register user should return user response as well. Why to unnecessary return this particular user, right? So here we will say user response, and here what we will do, we will return a new response. So I will just catch it in a variable. So we have a saved user, let's say, let's name it as saved user, better name. And here we will now return a new user response. Here we will say saved user dot get ID, comma saved user dot get username, and last one is role. So here I will say saved user dot get role. So again, after saving, we are just collecting the saved user, and we are returning a new user response, and we are passing three things: saved user dot get ID, dot get username, and get role. And get role dot name, because this will again return a string, because our user response needs a string over here, which is basically a role. Now we will go back to our controller. Let me zoom it a bit. And here what we will do, we will just collect the response. We will just collect the response, and we will just say return a response entity dot OK of our user response. And that's it. We have implemented our one of the API. Now what we will do, let's try to quickly test this particular API. Now let me bring up this particular application. Now there we go, our application is started. And guess what? We have just added a method, but we did not really add any mapping. How it is going to work without adding any mapping? So let's add a mapping, and here we will say, register. And here also we can add some request mapping saying API/user, so that the API will be /API/user/register, right? So that is basically our API. So now let's quickly restart our application. Meanwhile, let me just create a new API for us over here. So it is basically a post API. So what I will say over here, /API/users/register. And now what this needs is, this needs a JSON object, right? This particular JSON object for our request. So we have created this request, right? So it needs username, it needs password, and role is basically not required. So I will just pass a new username, let's say Chetan, right? And we will give password Chetan123, right? Simple password. Now what we will do, let's try to hit this API. Now do you see what is happening? We are getting 403. Why we are getting 403? Because we are not passing any authentication, right? We are not passing authentication is no auth. And if you go back inside our application, all our APIs are secured. If you see over here, apart from our authenticate API, all other API are secured. And that is the reason we are not able to call this particular API. But now when we say this API is going to public and anyone is going to register by using this API, then we need to make this guy public as well. So what we need to do, we need to add another matcher over here. So I will just copy this and I will add another one, and I will just add this particular API over here. Let me go back, let me copy it, and let's try to paste it over here. So we are permitting that particular API now, and now let's try to rerun this. There we go. So application is up, and let's try to hit it now. Now did you see our user is basically created? The user is basically created with ID 3. And now if I go to authenticate API and try to pass that user, so if I pass Chetan and what was it, Chetan123, right, and try to send it, then it should give us the respective JWT token. If I try to pass some wrong password, then it will again give me forbidden. So we have successfully added our user. Now let's go back over here and let's try to add. So we have added this self-registration part. Now let's add an admin API so that that guy can add an admin. Now let's go back and let's try to add another method over here. Again, we will say public, we will say response entity, and again we will pass the same user response. And here we will say register by admin. And again here we will get a request body, which is again going to be our register user request. There we go. So we have created this method, and now here we don't need to set any role because we expect this particular admin who is going to call this API to set that respective role. So what we will do over here, we will directly call this user service.register user. We will pass this particular request and we will get it in a variable saying user response, and we will just return response entity dot OK of your user response. And now here what we need to do, let's create another post mapping over here, and here we will add a mapping. Let's add /admin /create API /user /admin /create. Now this API is not going to public. This API will be called by your admin. Now here we are going to make use of @pre-authorize, right? So pre-authorize is something which we have already seen in the last videos. And here we will say has role, and here we will pass admin. This particular admin needs to be in single quote. Now if you remember, we already have one admin we have added by using a command line runner so that this admin can create other admins. So you ideally need to at least have one admin inside your application so that that guy can create other admins. Now your application is up. Let's go back over here. We will go to this particular authenticate API and let's create a token for admin. So we'll say admin1234. I don't remember the password. Let's go ahead and check it. It's admin1234. Let's try to get that particular token. We got the token. Let's copy it. And now we will call other API. Let me probably duplicate this tab. API /user /admin /create. And here we will pass the body, and here we will pass another one, that is role. And here we can just simply say admin. Now if anyone is going to hit this API, they will get 403 forbidden, because unlike this particular API, our admin creation API will be only accessed by admin and it is not public. Now let me go back over here and let me just copy this particular authentication token. Let's go back over here. Let's try to add a bearer token. Let me just replace this, and I will just say admin1, and because we are creating another admin, and we'll just say admin, and we will just say password as admin123, and here we will pass a role. And now let's try to hit this. Now if you see, the admin is created for us. And now let's try to get the token by using this particular admin1 and admin123. If you see over here, we are getting the respective token. If you pass another admin, it will not give you because this admin does not exist, right? So that is basically how we have created this particular scenario where one admin can create other admins. Now, when it comes to internal application, you do not have this particular self-registration. So in this case, this particular API is of no use. But your other API will come into picture over here, this particular API. Now here we have seen how we can create admins, but this admin can create other users as well. What this guy needs to do, this guy just have to pass the role over here, the user role, that this particular user is basically a user and not admin. For example, let's say Pushpa, right? And let's try to pass Pushpa123 as a password. And now if I send it, then you will see that a user will be created and not admin. So that is how you can manage your users, right? You can manage your users and admins. So we have simply created a couple of APIs in order to manage your users and roles. Instead of directly creating users by using command line runner, we have made it dynamic now, and we can directly add by using APIs. So that is how you can do user management, and we have also seen the implementation part of that. So that is basically it for this particular video. This was a simple video of how we can manage the users and create the users inside our application, and what is the right way of doing it instead of using your command line runner. I hope you have clear understanding of how we can create the user and manage them. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section. If you want me to cover any other topic inside Spring Security, let me know in the comment section. If you like the video, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to Code Snippet. Share this video with your friends so that they also have idea about user management. That's it for this video. See you in the next video.